Welcome to the Filmlings podcast,
a fetch podcast where we analyze all that goes into effective filmmaking.
I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Alex.
And this is episode 172, an unofficial history of comedy in American cinema, part 5, The Wit's End.
Yeah, and why are we calling it that, Jonathan?
So, in my estimation, wit is kind of the comedy style du jour. It is a style of comedy that has kind of pervaded a lot of, even not specifically comedic films. It's just like these really quick, quippy one-liners is kind of like the predominant style of comedy in my mind. And that's kind of what I wanted to look at with these 3 films. And we'll see how that holds up. How do you feel about the state of comedy, Alex, in the modern day?
I think comedy, I think there's still plenty of really good comedy out there. I think there's still plenty of really funny people, be it like comedians or writers or comedic writers. But I do think that a lot of comedy has been shaped by technology, in the sense of like social media and everything being boiled down into these really small clips. Like
Twitterfied.
And everything's been like TikTokified.
Yeah.
Or even the idea of like, and we've talked about this one before too, but you don't just get when you watch a trailer now, you don't watch a trailer. You first get a quick highlight reel of the best part of the trailer before the trailer starts. And even like YouTube videos do this.
And
now.
you
like
have to watch a trailer before the trailer.
You have to watch the trailer before the trailer. Like they're so, and I get it. They're just trying to keep you watching because our attention spans have become so fractured. But that's carried over into other things like comedy. Like one of the, if you scroll online, go doom scrolling or looking at some kind of reel or TikTok, and you find comedians, you might find somebody performing like a stand-up routine, but more often than not, you're not going to find a stand-up routine. You're going to find somebody doing crowd work and making like witty remarks based on the audience instead.
Yeah.
So again, something has been turned into like a very digestible, quick, relatable, interesting thing that spikes your dopamine real quick in your brain. So the long setup and punchline isn't really there, and it's more fast paced and how witty can we be real quick, which isn't necessarily a bad form of comedy, but there sure is a lot of it right now. So if it's not your thing, you might be having a hard time of it.
Yeah. And I'm really interested in how that relates to styles of verbal comedy that we've seen in the past. So like in relation to the types of films we talked about for Screwballs, I think we're definitely going to be able to associate some things like the Marx Brothers and stuff like that is very, very similar. But just to kind of give some strict definitions of some of the things that we're talking about, some of the things that I think we're going to be seeing today. When we say wit, it means the ability to say clever things, typically in a spontaneous, kind of off the cuff manner. And a lot of times, my
entire personality in high school.
Right. And we have a high school movie today. So some elements that go into wit, or I guess ways that wit manifests itself in comedy, are things like the quip, which is a statement or joke that may be witty, but is usually relies on sarcasm. And it's usually a really quick one-liner, but usually has a little bit of a bite to it, has some kind of sarcasm or critical element to it. And then there's also the repartee, which is a snappy comeback or capping statement. It's like just something that's said really quick to come back at what the other person said, but in a way that kind of finishes it and doesn't really leave any room for moving on from that point. So that's just kind of the general tone of things that I think we're going to be looking at. We're going to see other types of comedy, and we're going to see some of the elements of the comedy from the whole series. in certain ways coming back in here. One thing I do want to mention, because I sort of mentioned this in the last episode, and it's the year that's going to start this episode, because we're doing this history, right? So we've gone through the silent comedy films of the 20s and 30s. And then as that gained sound in the 40s and 50s and became the screwball comedies, then we looked at how that got kind of ridiculous as the studio code came crashing down, and anything became permissible, and we called that the absurdist comedies. And then last time we saw how that turned into the stoner comedies and all that kind of stuff. And as we kind of transition from that, the stoner comedies, which we did pull into the the late 2000s with The Hangover, there's one year that is, I just kept finding films that are like really, that have kind of held up, and they all came from the year 2004. There's like Napoleon Dynamite is from 2004. Anchorman came out in 2004. Dodgeball, Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, Meet the Fockers, Shaun of the Dead, White Chicks, which I wouldn't have even known if Alex didn't mention it in the...
I'm still shocked you never heard of White Chicks.
I think I had seen the poster. I just didn't know like anything about the actual plot of the film. I actually didn't even know that the characters on the poster were in disguise. So there you go.
Wow. Jonathan thought those were actual white chicks.
I probably did. I probably didn't even think about it. So yeah, White Chicks being, if you missed the Screwball Comedies episode, a adaptation of Some Like It Hot. So 2004, there was a lot of these comedies. They were, most of those are very much in that kind of irreverent comedy style that we're kind of talking about with the stoners, even though not all of them are specifically stoner films. But I think that blending of the irreverent as it kind of permeates into general situations, general comedy, general humor is where we're going to see a lot of that. We're going to see it kind of diffused into more pop culture style of films, which are basically the ones that we're talking about today. So, and we're covering a whole range from that 2004 to last year.
In perfect 10-year steps, Jonathan.
I know. When I realized that, I was like, I could keep looking, but it's just too.
No, I think perfect. It's intentional.
So yeah, we have them perfectly spaced out to see what we have been doing with comedy over the last 2 or 3 decades. Alex, what films are we highlighting?
Well, we're going to start off with Mean Girls, the original from 2004, directed by Mark Waters, written by Tina Fey, based on Queen Bees and Wannabes by Rosalind Wiseman, starring Lindsay Lohan, Rachel McAdams, and Lizzie Kaplan. Cinematography by Darren Okada and music by Rolf Kent. Then we'll check out Guardians of the Galaxy from 2014, directed by James Gunn, before he couldn't decide which side of the Marvel DC fence he was on, written by James Gunn and Nicole Perlman, based on the comic of the same name by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning, starring Chris Pratt, Zoe Saldana, Dave Bautista, Bradley Cooper, and Vin Diesel. One of them is a raccoon. Cinematography by Ben Davis. Music by the 80s. I mean, Tyler Bates, which I'm actually surprised that there's anybody credited with music. I guess there was score that wasn't pop music. But pop music is kind of that movie's thing. Mm-hmm. Is just being this other comedy style, which is just rapid fire pop culture references. And then finally, The Fall Guy from 2024, directed by David Leitch, written by Drew Pierce, loosely based on an 80s TV show of the same name by Glenn A. Larson, starring Ryan Gosling, Emily Blunt, Aaron Taylor Johnson, and Hannah Waddingham. Cinematography by Jonathan Sala, and music by Dominic Lewis.
All right, there we go. Let's get into it and talk about Mean Girls from 2000. Jason, come sit at our table and tell us what it's about.
Mean Girls from 2004. After being homeschooled for her entire life and having spent the last 12 years in South Africa, 16-year-old Katie Heron begins her first day at North Shore High School. She strikes up a friendship with outcasts Janice and Damien, who explain the school's various cliques to her, warning her about the Plastics, a trio of wealthy and mean girls led by the ruthless Queen Bee Regina George. When the Plastics meet Katie, they unexpectedly invite her to join them. Janice realizes that this is her chance to get back at Regina for all the mean things she's done, and convinces Katie to pretend to be friends with the Plastics as a double agent. Things are complicated when Katie develops a crush on Aaron Samuels, Regina's ex-boyfriend, who is strictly off limits. Now Katie must navigate a passive-aggressive rivalry with Regina while informing on the Plastics to Janice, and in the process must try her best not to let the glitzy status of the Plastics go to her head.
I had not watched Mean Girls before this, by the way.
Really?
Yeah. So I was
Jonathan, what movies were you watching?
I knew a lot of those quotes, but they make a lot more sense now.
I probably didn't watch Mean Girls until I was actually in high school, like a few years after this. But you know, I watched it pretty close to when it came out, I think. So it was entertaining. It was referential. I understood a lot of the cliques. We had those cliques in school. They probably weren't as strictly coded as they were in Mean Girls, and I don't think we really had like anyone who had a personality as big as the people in this film had a personality. I think that's blown up for the movie. But the point, one of the points of the movie is how close enough to reality it is for a lot of people of our generation, and then parodized it to make it extreme and funny.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about this. I was thinking about this kind of is the teen comedy film of the series. I guess Bill and Ted could kind of fit in there, but this is like the high school teen film. And I was thinking about how dependent high school films are on stereotyping, and not in like a prejudicial way, but it's almost in like an archetypal, like when you're watching a Western, you have to know what kind of character this is so you know how they're going to react, and then you understand how the reaction of everyone else relates to that. And it's like high school films are kind of the same way, where you kind of just have to know, and they literally lay it out in this film. I feel like it's become so ubiquitous now that you almost don't have to spell it out, but they spell out all the cliques as you're walking through the high school. But those stereotypes, like the idea of the Plastics or the goths or the whatevers, is like carries enough information with it that it just sets the foundation for all the interactions going forward.
It's a deeply seated cultural thing, and I think we take it for granted because we're Americans. But the idea of the American high school, especially as presented in movies like Mean Girls, is a very specifically like American, maybe like America and Canada type thing. Other countries have schools, other countries have high schools or something similar to it. But the way American high school works with the cliques and the intense social hierarchies and stereotyping, which are true in real life to an extent. I think that's one of the reasons why those movies rely so heavily on stereotypes, is that we as teenagers in high school are relying on stereotypes to, in one way or the other, whether we're accepting or rejecting them, make sense of the world around us. But that the way it's presented here, the way that synthesizes itself here, is fundamentally American and very easy for someone like me or you to just not notice how quintessentially American it is until you get an outside perspective, which is actually kind of unique because we actually have someone who's sort of an outsider perspective to the American school system because she's from Africa, even though she's white, which you can't ask. But we have a fish out of water kind of story here, which is used as a way to make it make sense that we're re-explaining all this stuff on screen. And by doing so, we then create an opportunity for lots of humorous observations regarding the stuff we're re-explaining on screen.
Yeah, and that's a good point because that's what I was about to bring up. Is that part of just thinking through where the comedy is coming from here, and I was realizing that part of it is just like watching the stereotypes fit into their stereotypes is where the comedy comes from. Like the vain girls being vain is funny because it's exaggerated, but in a way that we can still relate to. Like, oh yeah, I knew a girl like that in high school. Obviously, you didn't know someone as exaggerated as Regina George, I hope, in your high school, but you knew someone like that, and her going to an extreme with her behaviors and stuff like that is like, oh yeah, I know someone who was thinking that even if they weren't saying it, but that's how they acted. And so a lot of the comedy comes from just the identifiableness and relatableness of those stereotypes and watching them fit into that. But it also sets the stage for the plot, which is about kind of rejecting those stereotypes, which it usually has to be when you have a film that so heavily relies on stereotypes.
Yeah, that's kind of like the setup and the punchline, right? That you almost always expect in a high school movie based around stereotypes is that, perception or the mold you try to fit in doesn't really matter. Just be you, and that's okay. Which is honestly a good lesson, but yeah. It's one that you just kind of expect in this setting and format, right?
Yeah. And the plot is really pretty good, and the theming is solid in terms of the idea of the narcissistic paranoia and how even the insults that are projected by the plastics are just a reflection of their own insecurities and stuff like that. And then you have like the going along with the stereotypes is the arbitrary social system and arbitrary rule set that the plastics have made for themselves. And then Katie has to win by first be incorporating into that system, and then second, breaking it from the inside. And so a lot of those elements all kind of work out pretty intelligently.
One of the things I noticed rewatching this is that this movie covers a lot of ground just because it's made up of so many freaking montages. So many, like it tries
early
to
2000s, was a very montagey style of film.
Yeah, it could be introducing all the cliques. It could be like the rumors about Regina George's scene where we hear from so many different high schoolers at once. But it really does make an effort to kind of touch every corner of the school it possibly can. And through doing that, like it makes the whole like social aspect, social hierarchy of the school feel real and feel meaningful to these characters, and to us as an audience, which is kind of important because without that, the stakes feel more vapid, maybe as vapid as they really are. But, in order for the movie to have tension and to have us be interested in what happens to the characters, we have to believe that what they believe matters. And by seeing the wide reaction of the school to everybody and everything, when they recap that same montage over again, but now it's for Lindsay Lohan's character instead of Regina George, you start to see, oh, this is why it matters to these people. And you feel excited too, because, humans are hardwired to be social. And when other people, and to kind of seek out those positive social interactions and positive social interpretations, right? The ancient lone human dies. The ancient human who is friends with a bunch of other people who can help protect them and keep them alive survives. So we're hardwired for that. Pretty hardcore. And the way the movie is kind of shows that aspect of it makes it way more impactful. And then, of course, it just plays with the tension to make everything seem funnier.
Yeah. And some of those little details also just, it's kind of just world building, but in the sense that when you're doing world building, you want to kind of show the environment, but you also want to feel like the characters in that environment have a life outside of the screen. So it doesn't feel like facade town, but it feels like a place where people are actually living, which when you're doing something as ubiquitous as the high school experience, you have to make it feel like a real high school, or else anyone watching it who has had a real high school experience is going to know that you're a phony and that is not going to get the same relatability out of it if it feels like it was just kind of cobbled together.
Jonathan, have you ever watched any of Euphoria?
I have not.
It kind of has some aspects of Mean Girls, but it's so over the top, and definitely not meant to be a comedy. But I was just thinking about how you were talking about how it has to seem realistic, and one of the big questions I had when I watched Euphoria was,
I wouldn't say realistic, but it has to feel like there's more beyond the confines of the frame.
Yeah, an element of reality, right?
Yeah.
But I remember one of the things I thought when I watched the first season of Euphoria, which is all I've watched of Euphoria, I thought it was good. I thought it was maybe a bit much, but I thought it was good. Was either I'm too old and removed from high school to find this relatable, or this is nothing like the high school experience, or maybe it's only the high school experience for some very specific people. Of course, anytime you're watching a TV show or movie, everything's going to be played up because that's the only way the plot works. But just to kind of point out that this movie does achieve both an element of grounding itself at the same time that it achieves an element of heightened reality to make funny jokes about high school.
Yeah. And I think too that just the in terms of the plot of the film, just the structure of the getting revenge on the bully is just enjoyable. Like you know that that's where we're going from the beginning, so you kind of are just enjoying the Schadenfreude of the whole trajectory. But yeah, I mean, all these things going into it, and kind of the heart behind it is, I didn't realize this either because I haven't looked into it that much. But I didn't realize that this is like Tina Fey's pet project. And so we've been talking about SNL's influence on comedy, and this is a SNL film through and through.
Yeah, that's the weird thing, right? Is that this is an SNL film, and obviously, sometimes you see Amy Poehler or Tina Fey enter the scene, and you're
I was
like,
not expecting Amy Poehler, especially not like that.
Amy Poehler and Tina Fey are like besties, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of makes sense. And this really is Tina Fey's movie. Like there's a director on it, but this really does feel like Tina Fey's movie. And even though it is an SNL movie, it doesn't feel like an SNL movie to me. Does that make sense?
It's not SNL style. It's just SNL people. And again, it's like Tina Fey had something like she had to get off her chest with this film, and you can feel it.
Yeah.
And that's why there's so much like depth to it, because it doesn't have to be. There are plenty of high school comedy films we could have picked that are much like more surface level. And this one, I think, has a lot of lasting power because it has all the kind of surface comedy, but it also has like Tina Fey is trying to like express herself and her experiences through this film, and you can feel that. Yeah.
Because normally, if you talk about an SNL film, you think, oh, it's kind of a series of SNL's cast members popping up on screen over and over again. Mm-hmm. But this isn't that.
Or sketch style, like even when we talked about Groundhog Day.
Yeah, Groundhog Day is a little vignette-y, isn't it?
Yeah. The only other thing I was going to bring up about Mean Girls is when we talk about high school films, I don't think that we can skip over like the influence of John Hughes, and this feels along those lines of like the John Hughesy kind of film, but just edgier and more modern. But it kind of fits in with the kind of thing that he was doing, and John Hughes, I think, had a huge role in creating those high school films, even down to the division of the cliques and the breakdown of the social structure and the division of the cliques. A lot of that traces back to John Hughes's influence on those teen films from the 80s.
I mean, Breakfast Club kind of canonized a lot of the high school stereotypes.
Yeah. So yeah, I think John Hughes is very important to mention in this, and we did a whole John Hughes episode quite a while ago. I will include a link to it in the blog post.
All right, well, let's move on to Guardians of the Galaxy from 2014. Jason, take it away.
Guardians of the Galaxy from 2014. Peter Quill, aka Star-Lord, steals a mysterious orb from an abandoned planet and is attacked by henchmen of the interplanetary warlord named Ronan. Quill escapes, but when he refuses to bring the orb to Yondu, the leader of the bandit gang that raised him as a boy, Yondu puts a bounty on Quill. When Quill tries to sell the orb of the planet Xandar, he is apprehended simultaneously by the bounty hunter team of Rocket and Groot, a scientifically modified raccoon and sentient plant, respectively, and an assassin sent by Ronan named Gamora. All four are arrested by the local authorities and sent to a prison outpost in the planet's orbit. Once there, Gamora is attacked by Drax, who says he wants revenge because her boss Ronan killed his family. When Gamora explains that she intends to betray Ronan, all 5 of the outlaws team up to escape the prison and find a way to sell the orb. With Yondu's gang and Ronan's army chasing them, the team eventually learn the true nature of the orb and must prevent it from falling into the wrong hands to save the galaxy.
All right, Alex, I think I went back to try and double check, but I think this is the only Marvel film we have covered in the 8.5 years of this podcast. So there.
Really? We haven't done like
it.
Iron Man or something?
No, we've done like 5 Batman films, but I don't think we've covered any Marvel films.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, that kind of makes sense. Because the only way to really do that is if you're going to do either a superhero piece or a Marvel piece. And neither of those, I think, were ever very appealing to either of us.
Yeah.
Just because they're kind of just, I don't know, they're like the pop movies. They're not bad necessarily, but they're not
also
done for anything other than the sake of monetization. So
there are plenty of podcasts talking about those films. We don't need to throw our voices into it necessarily.
I think the closest we get is I get to something interesting of it is the idea that we've circled back around to like the 1930s, 1940s, where movie studios are just going to make what they're going to make, and they're going to hire a bunch of directors to do it. And some of those directors are so good that they slip in art to something that's otherwise just commercial product. And kind of like a Howard Hawks or Alfred Hitchcock type thing. But because we're in the middle of it, and because I'm kind of burnt out on Marvel and haven't watched it in 5 years, don't even get me started on something like Star Wars, which can't stop making stuff.
Yeah.
Like I can't really do that processing of repurposing it. But maybe one day in a decade or so, someone's going to look back and be able to pick apart some really brilliant stuff that happened in the Marvel universe. But I think for the most part, it just comes down to product to me, and it's not as interesting as it used to be. There was a period right at the beginning. Actually, I think from like Iron Man to around Guardians of the Galaxy 1, which is interesting we're talking about it today,
right,
where I was very excited about Marvel. I thought it was very interesting because you hadn't really seen anything that was trying to tell a story across multiple lines and movies at the same time like this before.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really interesting to me. And then everything after Infinity Wars was just nonsense. And again, haven't watched it in 5 years, so I maybe I'm wrong on that, but I doubt it. So,
well, I mean, Infinity War and Endgame was the 2-parter, right? That kind of capped the.
Yeah, it was like 2 parts of Infinity Wars.
Okay,
and one of them was called Endgame.
Right. Okay. Because as far as I know, I mean, I didn't even get that far. But after Endgame, I mean, it was kind of the end game, and then there were just a lot of loose threads that they just have continued in various formats. But also, the format structure broke down because the streaming thing happened, and it's like we're going to do series, we're going to do some series, we're going to take
it has to so many things. Streaming has ruined so much of the media world. Streaming has just absolutely trashed.
But I feel like
It's
the momentum
not
just
viable.
fizzled out after Endgame
Yeah.
in general.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't even following it at that point, but I feel like it just hasn't been that big of a thing since then.
Yeah.
But as far as I could tell, like it went out on a really high note, which is good. And I know that there are all those little things. And so someone who's following all those threads of WandaVision and whatever else is, or Thunderbirds, whatever the new
there's-
thing is.
Thunderbirds. I mean, Thunderbolts would be hilarious. Thunderbolts. Thunderbirds is like the puppets who drove like the jet planes in like the 60s
No,
not
yeah,
cartoon,
yeah, yeah.
just puppet show.
They did make a live action Thunderbirds.
Yes, they did. But yeah, the phase after, from my understanding, and this is an outsider's perspective, I'm sure lots of people will have more information than me, is that after Infinity Wars, there was supposed to be this new story revolving around the multiverse and this villain named Kang. But the problem is, besides the fact that they just had a hard time getting the plot going, because they didn't have, the Infinity Wars has a very nice structure to it. There's like the stones that Thanos is trying to get, and each stone kind of could represent a different character storyline building up to the main movie, and then you throw it all together. There's a lot of money involved, but other than that, it's pretty straightforward in terms of colliding plot lines as far as that goes. The thing they're trying to do now was really weird because they kept trying to introduce the multiverse, which is fun in its own, but when you try to carry the concepts between multiple timelines and multiple series, it gets really weird. That stacked with the problem of doing a lot of this content through series that people weren't necessarily watching.
Yeah,
Like
so there's no common
Yeah.
canon that you can expect everyone to understand.
Yeah, if you went to go see the new Thor movie or the new Captain America movie or the new Avengers movie in theater, you'd probably seen all the movies before it. But if you didn't have the specific
'Cause they were
streaming
only, like,
service
two,
that
yeah.
had the specific Marvel thing that you needed to know to understand the reference now, you don't get it. Plus, the multiverse is so complicated that it kind of became like math homework for everybody to try to keep up. And then the cherry on top,
And it's one of those
was
things that ruins stakes, right? Because that's the whole point with all the reboots and stuff is you just reset the timeline, jump to a different
Yes.
multiverse, and anything can happen again.
Yes. Yeah. You can bring characters back. And that's kind of happening right now, actually. Kang, the guy who was supposed to be the bad guy, that actor has had a giant controversy, which I don't know enough about to get into here. But essentially, it was big enough that he's no longer part of the Marvel Universe. So now the guy who was going to be the bad guy isn't there. So imagine if they were trying to do Infinity Wars and suddenly Thanos just stopped being the bad guy and they had to make up a whole new one. And now they're bringing Robert Downey Jr. back, spoilers, I guess, as a different universe's Doctor Doom, who's like the Fantastic Four's villain. And I still don't think they have the rights to Fantastic
always
Four.
Goes well.
Yeah.
Someone was redoing
Fantastic
it
Four
again
is
recently.
Fantastic Four's problem is that the rights are owned by Sony, and Sony just keeps making a crappy movie every 6 to 8 years, so they retain the rights. But yes, so it's a mess. It's a whole mess.
So
But-
Alex, what it sounds like to me is that the films are almost becoming, or I won't say the films. I will say
The media,
the
products?
the franchise is
the franchise.
is becoming almost in format similar to the comics, in which when you have comics, as far as I understand, there's just like a huge mass of comic books to the point where they can become collectible, but there's so many, and you're not really expected to know all of them. Some people will,
No.
but you can just kind of pick them up and you get one adventure story and whatever. But
Yeah.
that type of format doesn't fit for visual linear media in the way that it fits for like the mosaic of the pop comic book format.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, when you pick up a comic book, you're getting a complete story from the start of the book to the end of the book. At most, you might get an arc that lasts a year, maybe two, and then it wraps up. And then you're very likely to get an entirely different version of the character.
But what
who's
you're
done
not
by a
going to
different
get
artist.
is the story of Uncle Ben 6 times in a row.
Yeah, you're not going to get it repeated and repeated and repeated. They might retouch on it, but they're only going to retouch on it if they have something that they really want to do different. Or if they have some reason to reference that in a current storyline. But the timelines do move forward. Not very quickly, but they do move forward. Like Peter Parker is no longer a teenager. He's a grown adult. He owns like his own like multinational corporation now in the comics, because every single Marvel character has to be both a super genius and a titan of industry at the same time. And there's apparently there's no exceptions to that, which is
America.
Also, I got so sick of that in the Marvel movies where every third character we meet is for some reason a super genius. And I'm like, there can't be that many. There can't be that many super geniuses.
Okay, I will say, okay, last point on that in terms of format is that when you're picking up a Spider-Man comic, the understanding is, you know, Spider-Man's backstory, like the basic Uncle Ben died, great power, great responsibility, bit by a spider,
you know the mythology,
whatever.
Yes.
And so you can pick up a comic book, but every time you pick up a comic book, no matter what decade it's been since that mythology started, is you open it and it's just Spider-Man. The problem with a film is every time they reboot Spider-Man in like 30 years, you're not looking at Spider-Man, you're looking at Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield or whatever. And so every time they change that face, you have to like start over and make sure that that face is associated with the whole mythology. And that is a problem.
Have you seen Spider-Verse?
I saw the first one.
The first one. That's kind of what I'm talking about, because they riff on that, and it's great. It's honestly
because every time they do
that.
the Uncle Ben story, and it's a little different, or like, oh, you get the point. Yeah,
it's one of the nice things about the Miles Morales character is that he's different enough that it feels kind of fresh. Although I will say, I love the first Into the Spider-Verse. The second Into the Spider-Verse, I can't say it's bad, but I do have to say I hate it. And and it's not because it's bad. It's because it's half a movie. And there's no indication. If you look at the poster for the movie, if you read the title for the movie, if you're watching the movie for the first half of it, you have no idea that you're not going to get a complete story, that you're only getting half of a movie. And then around where the third act should start, I'm like, we're only halfway through the plot.
Oh no.
We're not going to do. And the whole thing ends on a freaking cliffhanger, and I hate it. I hate it for that reason.
Did they ever finish it?
They're supposed to make another one.
Okay.
Which is great. I'm sure when you string them together and you watch them together, it's going to be great. But the idea that you would put out a piece like that, like a completed movie like that, is so upsetting to me. Like,
the only thing I can think of is like Bahubali has the beginning and the conclusion, and the beginning ends on a gigantic cliffhanger, and it is half a story, but it's called The Beginning, and it is expected that you are going to get the conclusion.
Yeah, like it should be the second Into the Spider-Verse should be, I think it's called Into the Spider-Verse. Let me double check. But it should be called it's called Across the Spider-Verse. But it should be called part one of whatever it is. And it, especially because the first one doesn't end in the same way. Like the first one is a complete story from start to finish. Like the second one, like the character doesn't even finish an arc. Like you can't even consider it like, hey, an arc finished for the character, but there's a twist at the end, and now we have to see how he reacts to that in the next one. Like there's a big action scene and it cuts to black.
Whoa.
Like this, what? And yes, it's very dramatic, and yes, it makes me want to see the next one. You got me with your clickbait ending there, but like, come on, like that's just rude. And the whole idea of Marvel like always ending in a cliffhanger and never giving you really a complete story because they always want you to go see the next thing drives me nuts. But
Yeah.
I digress. Let's go back in time
Yeah.
to 2014 when I really liked Marvel, and I thought that all of the movies they made were really fun and exciting and unique because they were at the time. They hadn't ground themselves in the dust. And this one was kind of my introduction in a big way into enjoying 80s culture too, because it's a love letter to it made by the people who grew up in the 80s who made the movie. Guardians of the Galaxy. So, Jonathan, did you see this when it came out? I don't know how up to date you were on the Marvel movies.
This, yeah. I was still watching around this time when it came out. I'm pretty sure I saw this in theaters. There's a lot of moments that I remember seeing for the first time, but yeah.
Back when other movies came out in theaters besides Marvel.
Right. Barely. Yeah. So I was trying to think. It's weird to put yourself in that headspace, but it was like Iron Man had come out and Captain America, maybe.
I think like almost certainly at least 2, if not all 3 Iron Men had come out by 2014.
Yeah.
And I know the first Avengers was 2012. So Captain America had come out, Hulk had come out, Thor had come out.
Well, Hulk, I'm not counting Hulk. But yeah, it was like
the Hulk movies were kind of their own thing until they got rolled into this.
Yeah, Iron Man I consider the start of this saga of Marvel. Before that, there were superhero movies, but it was not this. Like the Avengers era of Marvel starts with Iron Man in my mind, which I believe was 2008.
Yeah.
And then 2010 maybe was the second one, or 2010 was Captain America. I'm not sure. But yeah, so then Guardians of the Galaxy comes in, and okay, before we get into the movie,
different tone.
Yes. So 1 second, but I'm gonna have to put a whole separate timestamp for the point where we actually start talking about Guardians of the Galaxy. This is why we don't talk about Marvel on the podcast, because we have talked about it in this same way where we just rant about it in many episodes in the past.
They take up so much space in the industry. It's so dominant, and especially in our space, because we're not necessarily people who are working on these movies. We're people who talk about these movies. And if you go online, so much ink, so much video has been spilt on Marvel that you don't get a choice. You have to have an opinion on it.
Yeah. So generally, when we talk about it, we will compare it to something like the Godzilla franchise from Japan in the 60s, or something, or like the way that Westerns were a predominant genre in the 40s and 50s, in a way where you just watch it and you understand all the archetypes, all the tropes, and then each film is a variation on a theme, and that's kind of what Marvel has become, again, up until that kind of end game point where it's just like you can walk into a superhero film, you know who the bad guys and the good guys are, you know generally the types of plot twists that are going to happen and stuff like that. Okay, all that out of the way, why we don't talk about Marvel. But yes, Guardians of the Galaxy did mark a little, it's still very early, like I said, but it does mark a little bit of that tone shift. Like Iron Man does have a lot of this kind of quippy, witty humor, and that's part of Tony Stark's character. It's very cynical. It's very kind of jabby. And then Guardians of the Galaxy kind of, but it still had a lot of seriousness to it. Like the story of Tony Stark, it's the tragedy of the fall, like we talked about in our tragedy series. He had everything, he gets broken down, he has to come back and learn humility and all that kind of stuff. And then Guardians of the Galaxy is just kind of a romp. It's just kind of fun. It's got the catchy music, and then really what I was realizing is that each of the 5, it's also like an ensemble film, which most of the other ones, it's Captain America, Iron Man, whatever, focusing on that character. Guardians of the Galaxy is an ensemble film, and almost every single one of the Guardians, actually I will say every single one, represents a different type of verbal comedy that all just gets mashed up together in this one film. And it was so catchy and so fun that it became the tone for the rest of the Marvel, and much to my chagrin, the Star Wars franchise going forward, which is my biggest beef with every Star Wars film that came out after this period.
My biggest beef with every Star Wars movie after the first one is that they exist.
There you go. With the
Come
after
at
A New
me.
Hope.
Well, okay. The first three get to
Okay,
exist.
there you
Everything
go.
after that should not. It was done. It was a perfect
Yeah.
trilogy. You didn't need to keep doing it. But you know why they did it? Money.
Money.
And you know why one of the worst, oftentimes the worst products come out of greed, like almost routinely. And here we are.
Yep. All right, we're not going to go on the Star Wars tangent, but pretty much copy and paste Marvel tangent onto Star Wars. Okay, so I like the types of comedy that comes out of this film is like by the combination of each of these characters who all have a very specific kind of verbal comedy style. Star-Lord, very quippy and witty, but he uses a lot of the pop culture referentiality in a way that is interesting because it's not the way pop culture is used in this film is not like parody like we've seen in things like Airplane or whatever, but it's just referentiality in order to be recognized and understood, but also referenced in a way that contrasts with the context that produces humor. Gamora is the straight man. Rocket is just purely sarcasm, and also constant sarcasm. And Drax is the overly literal, the one things go over his head, and Groot is overly predictable. He's like the hat trick where the hat never falls. But you always know what he's going to say, and he's just kind of something that is there for everyone else to play off of. But with all those different interactions, you get this kind of just very witty, very kind of quick one-liners from each of the characters in their own specific style.
I mean, that's kind of the fun part is how they're a big bag of misfits, right? So everything about them doesn't really fit together. And that's the fun part of watching them together. Especially the Guardians, the whole interest is built around their interactions, whether it be Drax not understanding the non-literal sayings of the people around him, or the should not work, but somehow they have chemistry romance between Star-Lord and Gamora, or Groot and Rocket kind of like having this weird connectivity, even though they shouldn't, neither should be able to talk at all, but
Yeah.
they can. And they somehow communicate with each other too. So, and then of course, butting heads with each other, discord within the group, but somehow managing to make it work in the end. Misfit family. It's a very, very fun, appealing idea. I think part of the humor too around Star-Lord is not just that he has a bunch of pop culture references. And I think the effect of this has maybe gone away as the styles become more popular. But the idea that all of his pop culture references are out of date by like 3 decades is, I think, intended to be part of the humor. But you don't notice it because referencing 80s and 90s pop culture has become very popular in pop culture.
Yeah, it's just standard. Yeah, and it's also interesting in a film like Guardians of the Galaxy, which is itself pop culture. Yeah, I don't know, like the entire brand of Marvel is to be referenced as pop culture, and then they use that same tactic within this film. And I will say that a lot of Star-Lord's personality has precedent in, except for the pop culture aspect, but just his actual personality is precedented by Kirk in the Star Trek reboots. It feels very similar to Chris Pine's portrayal of Kirk in the reboot series from 2009. That's just another element of the pop culture scene around the time. Another element of the comedy in Guardians, which is again has been in there from Iron Man in certain ways, but there's this constant undercutting of tension or seriousness at every point by something unexpected or silly, and it works to an extent. But at some point, when it's every single serious moment that gets undercut by either a joke or something surprising, then you're kind of left with a film without any serious moments.
I think it works if it's not overdone. And I think it's because it's a subversion of expectations, which is something that can be fundamentally comedic. But I think you're right. I think if it gets overdone, then you forfeit the rest of the story. And if you have just a bunch of funny moments without meaningful character moments or arcs in between them, then you don't really have a movie. You just have a skit.
Yeah. And part of the reason I bring this up is because I think it works pretty well in Guardians of the Galaxy. I think a lot of the things that Guardians of the Galaxy does works pretty well for what Guardians of the Galaxy is, because it is a very light film, because it is a very, again, kind of a romp. The problem is that it got so popular that these techniques that worked for Guardians of the Galaxy got transmitted to future films that should have had more seriousness and gravitas to them. In some ways, like the Thor films took on a lot of the tone of Guardians of the Galaxy and stuff like that. But yeah, in Guardians of the Galaxy, it kind of works for the most part. It still happens a lot in Guardians of the Galaxy. And it does have a pretty decent like core to it, the found family core. It's layered really well because each of the characters has their own backstory of why they've been alienated, no pun intended. Each layer is a little flimsy, but there are enough layers of it that it builds up to the final moment of them all like joining hands to, use the power of friendship to win the day. Works out pretty well. I will say though that in terms of our Marvel rant and the way that the full arc of the Avengers series works, it is a very interesting film to be the one that sets up Thanos and the Infinity Stones as the major through lines for the rest of the saga. Like, it is, again, it's a very light film. It's a very fun film, but it sets up the primary drama for all of the Marvel films going forward to Endgame.
I think if the idea is that the comedy comes from a contradiction of characters, then it is kind of perfect in the sense that the unserious chuckleheads that are the Guardians are the ones to first encounter Thanos as the big bad evil guy, the super serious, super dark, grim Thanos.
Yeah. And again, I didn't finish the full arc, so I don't exactly know how that played out in terms of, I didn't even see the Guardians interact with the Avengers. I don't know when that happens.
Basically in the final one. Like, not a lot. Most of their interaction comes with Thor. Thor is basically a member of the Guardians for a period of time.
Oh, interesting. Okay. There's another interesting, well, this is a small point, but there is a joke that is very prevalent in a lot of different kinds of movies that comes up in this one. I'm not saying that it came from this one, but I'm just throwing this out there because I'm a little bit tired of seeing this one. I understand why it's there, but the whole like name calling and oversensitivity to name calling joke is played out in my mind. I'm just going to say I'm tired of seeing the whole like don't call me one specific, like on its face kind of innocuous insult, and then, or like, call me that one more time. And it's just like, and then someone else will randomly say that word, and you're like, oh, I know that's the trigger word for this person. And in this film, it's like the whole vermin thing with Rocket, which plays into the found family and all of that. But it's just, it is used in so many films where someone is overly sensitive about one specific word that really shouldn't be that big a deal. But we know, oh, for that character, someone's going to say that word, and it becomes like Chekhov's insult. I just don't think it's the most effective. It works sometimes, and it worked for a while, but we've done it a lot. Okay, guys, enough with that one.
I think it's a pretty easy setup and payoff, especially for
it is. It's easy
characters. I think that's why you see it around so much.
Anyway, that's one of my modern comedy hot takes.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think this is very much meant to be, and I think this goes for a lot of Marvel, is very easy watching. Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the reasons why they've had such a hard time in their new phase, which the phase numbers don't even make sense, by the way. Everything up to Infinity War should have been phase 1. But it's like phase 4 or something like that. But
Guardians was phase 4?
No, Guardians is probably like phase 2.
Oh, you're saying we're in phase 4.
Yeah, no, phase 4 is everything after Infinity Wars, I think. Okay. And I may have even gotten that wrong. But the point is that leading up to that, it was very easy to follow along with what's going on. And Marvel movies are kind of meant to just be really easy to watch and pay attention to. You don't even really have to pay attention to them.
Or not much. Pay attention. Taylor was doing stuff while I was watching the film, and she was just jamming out. She didn't even have to watch it.
Yeah, they do. They just show you everything that's going on, and nothing's meant to be like super secretive. If there is a twist in the Marvel movie, like you're probably going to guess it by the end of the first act.
Yeah,
and that's not a bad thing. They're just easy watching movies. They're easy, fun action movies. But one of the problems I think they ran into after Infinity Wars is suddenly they tried to do this big arching multiverse conspiracy thing with all these moving parts in it. I was like, no, the reason Thanos worked as a villain was he was so simple and straightforward. He was like, get stones, kill people. That's it. That's it.
I will destroy everything if I achieve this goal.
Yeah. Exactly. It's so simple and straightforward. And everything was too complicated in the new one, whether it be trying to watch both movies and TV shows, and those TV shows get canceled constantly, so nothing ever finishes. So it just got weird and confusing and hard to follow. And that's not what Marvel is. Marvel is supposed to be easy to watch and easy to digest. And that's why a lot of people like it, because the world is a hard, confusing place. And you can shut off your brain and watch Chris Pratt dance to some 80s music on a tape deck. And it's silly and it makes you smile. And it's fine. It's fine that it is what it is. In fact, it's good that something like that exists. But when they try to be something they're not, like in the most recent phase, they run into trouble. And I think that's pretty apparent. There's a bit of a disconnect there. There still are plenty of people who love it just because they love Marvel, and that's great. That's good for them. But I think the magic that was there in the first phase, what I'll call the first phase of Marvel, everything up to Infinity War, is not there anymore.
Yeah. All right. I think that's the Marvel rant for now. So let's move on to The Fall Guy from 2024, last year. Jason, take it away.
The Fall Guy from 2024. Working as the stunt double for action superstar Tom Ryder, Colt Seavers breaks his back during a stunt accident and abandons his career and his girlfriend, camera woman Jody Marino. 18 months later, Colt is contacted by film producer Gail Mayer, who tells him that Jody is directing her first film, a space opera film titled Metal Storm, starring Tom, and that she wants Colt to join the production in Sydney. But when he gets there, Colt learns that Jody never asked for him and is still angry about their breakup. Gail reveals that she actually called Colt in because Tom Ryder has disappeared, and she wants Colt to find him before it causes production trouble on the film. But when a dead body shows up while Colt is following Tom's trail, he realizes things are more serious than he thought. As he starts to slowly rekindle his romance with Jody on set while doing his stunt work by day, he becomes more entangled in the mystery of Tom's disappearance by night. He must get to the bottom of it in time to help Jody finish the big project she's always dreamed of before it gets canceled.
And Alex, I wanted to pick a modern comedy film that, was distinct from Marvel, because Marvel has become like a comedy section of the world. Little did I know that I picked a comedy film that was just making fun of Guardians of the Galaxy pretty much the whole time.
Because of the space movie in the background?
Because it's a space movie about a space cowboy who falls in love with an alien, and it has to do with pop music.
I thought
kind of. It's making fun of a lot of things, but I think Marvel is definitely a big one.
With the desert setting and some of the costuming, I was thinking that it was both poking fun at Dune and Mad Max.
Yeah, it's very much like all the plot things they were describing sounded like Guardians of the Galaxy with space cowboy and meets alien kind of a thing, or Star Trek or something. But then every time they showed it, the aesthetic of what they were making was very, like Dune. And then his performance was like just Matthew McConaughey. It was just Matthew McConaughey. So yeah, there were a lot of layers, and then like the logo of the thing is basically the Metallica logo. I don't know. Someone was having fun mashing up as much referentiality as they could without literally referencing any one specific thing.
I thought one of the funniest aspects of this movie, which by the way, I guess it's a comedy. There's plenty of funny parts, but it's more of like I would call it like an action comedy. Like it's right, very much about the action and the romance, and then there's also some comedic moments in it.
I think action comedy is, a huge aspect of comedy films, probably owing a lot to Marvel being both action, sci-fi, and comedy, and taking up so much cultural imagination.
One of the funniest parts about this, though, is that Emily Blunt's character, at least in our protagonist's eyes, is supposed to be this brilliant up-and-coming director getting her debut of the movie she's dreamed about making forever. And it's this absolute freaking nonsense in the background.
Yes.
And that's actually one of the things that led me to the idea I talked about earlier, where maybe we've just cycled back around to the 1940s, where studios just pump out like generic nonsense that kind of appeals to broad audience bases based off of what's already popular, but there might be some artists in that pipeline who find opportunities to genuinely make art within that project-based system. So I think at the best reading of what's going on there, that's it. But I think the idea is that it is supposed to be crazy stupid if this is somehow considered that. And then, of course, Aaron Taylor-Joy as the evil actor does a pretty good job of being a bad actor when he's
Aaron Taylor Johnson.
Aaron Taylor Johnson. Oh, is Aaron Taylor-Joy another actor or actress?
Anya Taylor-Joy, yes.
Anya Taylor-Joy. Okay. That should not be allowed. The Screen Actors Guild should get involved. Like the Screen Actors Guild has rules about you can't have like the same stage name as somebody else. Like that's too close.
Yeah, it's pretty confusing.
I guess they're not the same gender, so that's part of what makes it okay, but it's too similar. I don't like it.
All right. Anyway, yes, he does a good job being the bad actor.
My gosh, his like Hamlet reading is hilariously bad.
But everyone is like, he's an a-hole, but he's such a good actor.
Yeah, that's the funny thing. Like the perception everybody has of one another is so warped, which I have to say is one of the most accurate things to actually being and working in Hollywood that I've seen represented on screen.
I wanted to talk to you about this. It
is so true. And part of it is that part of me is very cynical and wants to say that everybody needs to be there to pursue their own thing. So everyone's very hyper complimentary of each other.
This is Alex sitting in his expat chair, smoking a cigarette, giving us the insider information.
Very much so. So there is that element of that where there is a cynicism to it where you have to suck up to someone like Gale. You have to suck up to someone like the actor in this movie, whose name I don't even remember. You just have to do that in order to get the jobs you want, because you want the opportunities to actually create the thing you want to create. There's an element of that.
Be in a Marvel movie.
But don't underestimate, and this is the one that drives me nuts, don't underestimate the power of a true believer. That is something that I think people miss a lot in a lot of aspects these days, whether it be...
What do you mean by that? Define, what do you mean by that?
It's so easy to dismiss somebody else as only saying the things they say, embracing the beliefs they believe because of a cynical outlook on life. Like so-and-so has embraced a political stance purely because it's going to garner them A, B, or C, or purely because they want to spite A, B, or C. But what I believe and what I've genuinely found when I've talked to people who worked in the industry in this case, or spoken to people with certain political beliefs, is that oftentimes there might be an element of that, but it's very subconscious. What you're more likely to find is that people really believe the hype. And when you're in a space like the one that you see here where everybody's on set, there's a lot of money involved, everyone's speaking the same way, it's very easy to start believing it too. I was kind of sheltered from it because of the work that I did when I was in Hollywood. I was near set, but I would come in after everybody else had left for the day and then work on the footage they had made. So they were all in a social situation where they could talk about how good the thing they were making was, and they were so hyped up about it and all that. I was sitting there in a dark room alone looking at it going like, we're paying money to make this? All right, I guess. And then processing the footage on my own. So there is that element of it. And, you know, you'd hear people be excited to be on a project or be on a show or talk about some of the credits they have. And you'd be like, oh, that's great. That's awesome that you made money and you got that experience. What were you on? And then they tell you the name of the thing and you'd be like, oh, that was, I don't want to name any specific examples. I feel like that's rude, but they tell you a name of a movie and it would be a movie that was just obviously bad. Yeah. And I know I'm some, highfalutin film grad with a podcast about movies. So everyone thinks that I think all movies are bad. That's fine. I don't think that. I think there's a lot of really good movies out there, but I also think there's a lot of undisputable garbage. And somebody would tell you a credit like that and they'd be like, yeah, it was a great experience. It was such a good movie too. I was so excited to be on it. And you just see it so often. And then you'd meet people too, kind of like to get into more of the nitty gritty, where you'd meet individuals who you'd hear about how talented they were. And then you'd listen to them talk and you'd be like, oh, you have no idea what you're doing. You're either really lucky, like talented, but you don't understand what you're doing, or you know the right people related to the
or
right
everyone else is desperate.
Everyone else. And that's the thing. Once you have a bit of influence or power, that's all she wrote. It's like a snowball. People want to attach themselves to you in order to get the rest of you, their own thing made or their own thing produced. That's like the only element that I saw missing from this, is that everybody would constantly be asking somebody more influential than them if they could help them get something made that they were working on. That's the one thing that was missing. That you'd see that all the time. But other than that, the like over the top complimentary nature of people who are clearly not good at whatever they're doing is very obvious.
Or just like polishing a turd or whatever. But yeah, I did feel like Gale was scarily accurate. I'm not even in Hollywood, but I've interacted with people in any kind of like even pseudo artistic type of sense where there's like a sense of pride that goes along with whatever it is that you're making, that can be so easily manipulated. And she was so spot on with the whole the use of flattery and hidden motivations in her manipulation was scary, but scary in a way like, oh yeah, no, I've met people like that. I mean, they weren't, covering up a murder plot, I don't think. But definitely using all those tactics to get just to whatever their end goal is. Yeah, I thought that villain arc was great.
I'd say like some of her like affectations were very old school, like almost like a 70s movie producer or an 80s movie producer. But outside of that, it was
the tactics are the same.
Yeah. Mixed with like a weird incompetence mixed with a certain competence. It's very strange. Like she actually managed to organize some crazy stuff in order to try to set up Colt as the fall guy, but she can't actually wrangle her actor that she's the producer for, or like get him to do what she wants, all that stuff. Also, I just want to throw this out here. That's not how producers and actors work. Maybe it would be like an agent of his or a manager. But
yeah, he did have some direct access to the producer, who was probably sitting in a comfy office somewhere.
Yeah. Also, producers don't do work. They hire other people to do work.
They took out a few middlemen, but you get the point, I guess. Also, yeah, like between the producer and the stunt guy too. I don't know. Anyway, I do think it's interesting that in terms of some of the comedy, we still have a lot of that kind of undercutting of tension with humorous moments. And a lot of the like, I rented this film on disc from the library. And I was watching some of the like outtakes or behind the scenes stuff. And it seems like a lot of the individual moments, especially where Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt are having little back and forths, their little like quippy moments. It seems like a lot of that was kind of improvised. And so it was literally kind of repartee style, where it's just that you say something and then I'll say something back and you say something. And then in editing, they would pick whichever interaction they felt was the best one.
I mean, technically they always do that in editing.
Well, okay, that's true. But I think it's interesting when you do that kind of improvisation thing, then it means that the comedy that you're going for is only for the kind of immediate effect. It's kind of by definition not related to a setup and payoff, because if it was, you would have to say a specific set of words in order to set up the right kind of thing. But in a lot of these, it's a very fluid kind of dynamic style of comedy where they can just say things and it only relates to this moment in the film right here. It's not necessarily going to be super relevant later on down the line. And they do have some of those setups and payoffs, and so the style is kind of mixed there. But I just, in terms of thinking through like the old screwball comedies, all of those words were so specifically chosen and they had to be said the right way in the right order because they are all leading up to something. So we have almost like the quick His Girl Friday type of scenes, but they're a little less intentional here. It's just, we're just kind of relying on the actor's familiarity with those types of things to give us the sense of it, as opposed to building an entire film specifically on all those lines that are going to run through the whole film. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, I mean, you might gain a level of humor from the spontaneity of random interactions, but you forfeit a lot of the structure of writing, which is also funny because there is this little side meta plot line about how the movie is constantly being rewritten.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, and there's even a joke from one of the writers where one of the writers comes up to the director and is like, I figured it out. We just have somebody recognize the problems of the third act by recognizing that they're in the third act. And I'm pretty sure that actually happens in the movie.
Yeah, almost. But yeah, I will say that part of this is again another like very easy watch. It's a very fun movie. And the chemistry between Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt kind of carries the whole thing, is very fun. They have lots of good action too. But it's meta in a way that is really hard to do, because once you make a film meta, now I'm thinking about the film as a film. And what I want when you start being meta is for you to say, I'm recognizing these tropes of films, and here's how I'm going to do better than those. But I feel like in this film, it's like I'm going to recognize the tropes and the silliness of films as an excuse for using them in my own film. And so I feel like a lot of those things, like, you know, we have to get over the plot holes in the third act, or should we use this split screen? This is a little cheesy. And then they use the split screen and it's like, oh, I get it. You're using it as you're debating it. And it's funny, but also it is cheesy. So we're acknowledging the fact that what we're doing is cheesy, as opposed to trying to come up with some kind of big brain solution to the cheesiness.
Yeah. I mean, this movie is clever, but it is also just fun. So It's not trying to do anything too high-minded. It's just trying to be witty, get it, while having fun delivering like this interesting, almost like film noir plot where somebody's set up to be the fall guy. I guess
I will say it took me way
a fall guy plot. Yeah.
It took me way too long to understand the pun of the title. I'm just going to
throw
that
it,
out
because
there.
he also fell at the start, but he was really the fall guy all along. But
he's the patsy. Yep. And I will say that the theme is not terrible. They have this theme of that he sets up at the very beginning of the pride comes after the fall. And so after his fall, he's too proud to call her back, and that causes all these things. But there's also an element of the pride coming after the fall with the antagonist too, with the actor guy, and he has a fall, and then he suddenly has to cover up his image and cover his own pride. So you have the kind of foil aspect of that. And they both go into hiding after their various falls, and then they have to get drawn back out, both by Gale. So yeah, there are some of those layers. It is a pretty surface level film, but they put in a couple of those layers. And I think that the film fills a gap that usually when we go on the Marvel tangent, we come to some point of, all films have to be big budget Marvel films now. We can't just have mid-level, like just fun films that aren't amazing, spectacular things, but they're just kind of mid-level, fun, easy to digest films. And I think that what we're seeing is kind of a return of that. Like I said, after the Infinity Wars saga and the Marvel influence has dispersed itself, I think we're seeing some of those mid-level, fun, rompy films that aren't attached to a franchise coming back. And this is kind of a pretty good example of that. It's not trying to be too much more than what it is.
I'm trying to look up the box office on it.
It underperformed a little bit.
It was made for 125 to 150 million, and it returned 181 million. So it made 30 million. That's not terrible. And that's probably underreported because I don't know if it includes global numbers. But yeah, that's pretty good. It's also pretty big. It's not Marvel big. It's technically about a third of what's typically spent on a Marvel movie, but it is a lot.
Yeah,
so.
In order to mimic or make fun of some of the Marvel things, they still had to use a little bit of budget.
I was having a discussion with a friend the other day where we were talking about indie movies and indie movies struggling, and he was making he was talking about Sean Baker, because Sean Baker just pulled the award that shall not be named, I believe. But we were talking about the movie that won it, which was Anora.
Oh yeah, that was Sean Baker.
Received so much press, I was surprised to learn that Sean Baker had made it, because he normally does not make stuff that gets that much attention.
Yeah, he got his name with, like, he made a film on an iPhone, and now he's big Hollywood man.
Yeah, Yeah, so it was weird to see him talking about indie movies. And by Hollywood standards, it was an indie movie. It had a budget of like $6 million. I'm sure 1 to 2 of that went to advertising. Or maybe it doesn't include advertising listed there because they made such an advertising push with this.
Yeah.
It was like on daily talk shows type deal before it came out. And I remember they really made a big deal out of the actress who kind of had her big break in Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Then became the lead in here, and they really made a push to it. When you start hearing all of the daily talk shows kind of like leading off with, and now she's such a big actor, followed up by somebody who you've never heard of, you're like, okay, I'm being sold this. But I looked up the budget of the movie.
A star is not born, a star is created.
Very much so. It was $6 million, which is indie by Hollywood standards. And it returned about 60 million, which is a way better rate of return than something like The Fall Guy. But I will say, Jonathan, if you were an independent filmmaker, not an indie filmmaker, an independent filmmaker, could you pull $6 million out of your butt to make a movie?
No, I could not. If I called in every favor I possibly could, I don't know if I could get that much money.
Yeah, exactly. At the very least, you'd have to call in a bunch of favors, right?
Yeah.
In which case, it's not really independent filmmaking, is it? No, it is not.
Or just go into so much debt that like my entire life is riding on this film. I don't think they'll let you go into like millions of dollars worth of debt, will they? Someone
well,
probably
that
would.
depends on who you are, Jonathan.
That's true. Not me.
They're not going to let me or you do it, but if you own like a giant tech company, they'll probably let you do it because you'd be fine.
Yeah. But regardless, it is still possible to make an independent film because of the all the tools that you need are there. You can do it. But my thing is always, whenever Apple comes out with a new phone that they're like, this phone will replace every cinema camera ever created. And I'm like,
dude,
yeah,
every year.
But, once they invented ballpoint pens, it's not like everyone became Shakespeare all of a sudden. You still have to like have an idea and have talent and observations and stuff like that.
Yeah, it is a little weird the way they talk about it. But of course, they're trying to get you to buy a phone.
Yeah.
By the way, I am still rocking my iPhone 8.
Yeah, I went dumb phone route, but that's probably just because I was working on a lot of cell phone marketing content and I got burnt out on it. Anyway, we are way off base here. I think that probably just means we hit the limit of our Fall Guy conversation.
Yeah. I mean, hey, it's a fun movie. I recommend it.
It is very fun. Yeah.
It was actually, so the timing did not work out, Jonathan. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to go. But the college I'm currently going to does have a monthly movie night for free with like snacks and stuff.
Oh, nice.
And the movie they were showing this month was Fall Guy.
No way.
Unfortunately, it was one of the nights I work, so I wasn't able to go. But I thought it was on point that ended up being the case.
That's awesome. I definitely recommend it. That is our example of a modern comedy film that is somewhat broken from the chains of the franchises, even though it does kind of revolve around a commentary on the franchises to a little bit of an extent. Okay, but let's shift into overall notes. And I think it's important to note that we kind of tried to pick films that are basically like good examples of modern comedy, because there are a lot of films that use a lot of these techniques. But, when we touch on something that is really good or really popular, there's always kind of the downstream effect of copycats that are not so good or not worth really talking about. And I'm sure that there are plenty of those in the classic golden age of Hollywood. But, there's definitely that element of increased supply. Like there's just more films being made, and so there's a lot more bad films being made. These are kind of the ones that give us something to latch onto, but there's a lot of other films that use a lot or don't use the techniques in these films as well, but they just there's a lot more of those out there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's kind of true of most of the stuff we talk about. Like,
Right.
you can always, it's just a bag of tools, really, at the end of the day, and you can use them. And if you have the right vision and you use them at the right times and the right proportions, you're going to get something good. And if you mess up with one of those, you might get something moderate to mediocre. And if you just don't know what you're doing and flub around a bit, you end up with The Room.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of what one of our goals at the beginning of this show, one of the things we talked about a lot early on in the show is like cinematic rhetoric, right? It's the tools, it's the types of techniques that are used to create a film, a piece of work, to kind of convey I don't want to say message, but just convey what the film is. And so that's kind of what we've been looking at through the comedy series, is the way that those different rhetorical tools have shifted and the ways that you can use them in different ways and stuff like that. But yeah, it's always like, these are certain ways that you can produce comedy, but they can be used well or poorly in a variety of circumstances.
Or for evil.
Or for evil, yes. Yeah. So what have we learned? What's the state of comedy? We've gone from the silent clowns with purely physical comedy through the fast talking wisecracks of the screwballs, through to the absolute extreme of absurdity and ridiculousness, to the irreverence and irresponsibility of the stoners, and now to the witty sarcasm of the modern comedy.
Well, I have two thoughts.
Are we missing anything?
One is that it's secular, and that each of those represent a main element of comedy, and each one becomes more popular at a time and then subsides. I mean, you can look at the wit of nowadays and then look back at Screwball. You can look at the physical comedy of the physical quick-paced comedy of the silent era, and then look at some modern silent physically based comedy. A lot of TikToks kind of fall into that genre as well, just vertical. My other idea is that it's just all vaudeville, Jonathan. All modern comedy just derives from different elements of vaudeville.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point, because when we're talking about comedy, especially in contrast to like our tragedy series, we're using the same medium of film, but with comedy, there's a lot more of a goal of entertainment, amusement, just a feeling of a general positive feeling. Whereas with tragedy, when we're talking about more like artsy films or film buffy films, a lot of times those films are some kind of exploration of, what's life all about, or some kind of warning story of, this is potential negative outcomes of these types of actions or circumstances. And so the goal of the films are very different. But ultimately, when we're on this side, when we're on the comedy side, it is just a lot of what makes people happy. And that's what vaudeville was like. Let's just show you a lot of things. Some of them are impressive. Some of them are humorous. Some of them are unexpected. And, let's just show you them one after the other, and something is going to tickle your fancy.
Yeah. A lot of these are about joy. I mean, there are some comedies with really good central plots and messages, but it's not necessary for a great comedy to have a central message or motive or plot. I would argue that like Bill and Ted is probably one of the great comedies of its type and era, but doesn't really have much of a main point besides be excellent to each other. And even then, I would say they don't really do much work demonstrating that in the movie. They just kind of say it over and over.
Yeah, and usually you need a little bit of that core, even if it's just lip service like Bill and Ted. But ultimately, like you said earlier, which, there's a lot of times these films turn into the turn your brain off and just enjoy this whatever's happening. I mean, with the clowns, it's like, wow, that's really impressive. Those actual things that they're doing. With the screwballs, it's a lot of like trying to keep up, and man, some of those it's just almost too much work to actually follow every single thing that they say. And so I think there's also a little bit of like an averaging out over time where you see things that were very specific, especially like in Silence, where you literally could not use sound and verbal comedy, through when they started with the verbal comedy and then they relied super heavily on it. And you see kind of throughout the rest of the, leading up to the present, you see all those things kind of diffuse and the lines start to blur. And that's kind of just what has happened with all of our genres and media and stuff. Is just the lines start to blur, and it all kind of like, you can get a little bit of it from any kind of film that you watch.
Yeah. And that opens up a lot of interesting opportunities, but it also creates a lot of burden when you try to do too many things at once.
Yeah. All right. Well, with all of that, Alex, we have a bit of an announcement. A little tiny announcement. What's in store for the future, Alex?
Well, for now, at least, Jonathan, this is the last Filmlings episode.
That's right. As such, as in this format, this style, at least.
Yeah. We can't say it's forever, but we can't. We also can't
say when.
Yeah. Oh God, no. No. Life is what life is, and you've probably heard me talk about it a bit this year. Well, probably a lot. But I'm in school at the moment, and I'm working full time. And Jonathan has recently welcomed his second child, and life continues on. And we've talked about a lot of movies,
a lot,
and to just it's not unfun to watch movies, but it has become another thing in the schedule.
It takes time. I mean, you can't movies are not TikToks, and takes time to watch them, takes a little bit of time to think about them, takes a little bit of time to talk about them.
Yeah.
And time is a precious resource in the lives of early 30-year-old people.
Yeah, we're in our 30s now. We ain't 20 in our 20s. We started this podcast when we were 21? 21, 22.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And it's been very fun, but our lives when we were 22 were so different.
Yeah.
So different in terms of responsibility and timing and like life ambitions and stuff. And this isn't something that you can put away in the sense that, like, I think the way I watch movies will forever be changed. Has forever been changed. I hope it has been for you guys as well, hopefully in a positive way.
No, we ruined everyone who listens
King
to
Kong.
us is now ruined. They just can't enjoy movies anymore. That's what listening to film podcasts does.
I hope that, you know what? I think I went through that phase too, but I think you kind of come back around to it. And I think once you learn what each thing is for, it becomes different.
Yeah.
As we've done more of the podcast, Jonathan, I've started to think about movies the way that I think about food a lot. Okay. And there are some people who are food snobs. Like, there definitely are. But I think it's a lot easier for people to grasp that food is different. You know, there's some things that you pick up as a snack There's some things that, there's fast food that you get when it's convenient, but it's still delicious. It might not really be good for you if you have it every day, but it's delicious and it's greasy and it's over the top. And then there's like fine dining that's kind of hoity-toity and hard to access, but also if you actually eat it, you understand why it is so good, and everything in between. But
I think about there's a video from the godfather of coffee YouTube, James Hoffman, that is kind of along those lines, and it's kind of shaped the way that I think about a lot of things. But he talks about how as you get into coffee or anything that has a lot of depth or quality to it, and you learn all those nuances, you can see why bad coffee is bad coffee. But he also says the point of that video is drink the bad coffee sometimes. If you're traveling or whatever and you're in a place where they're just making coffee in a coffee pot, just drink it. It will make you appreciate the good coffee more. But you have to have kind of the full sense of what coffee can be in
sometimes
various
you just need
contexts.
To not have a caffeine headache.
Yeah, that's right. What is the fastest way to caffeinate right now?
Yeah. Like I cannot be having withdrawals right now. No, thank you. But yeah, we've watched so many movies, guys. So many. We made the decision, maybe foolishly in retrospect, to not be like every other movie-based review media where you do one movie at a time. We decided
2
to do
hours on one movie.
Yeah, we decided to do batches. And oh my gosh, we've covered so many. Like, what is it, like 500 plus?
Yes, 525 films after The Fall Guy.
A lot. And we've touched on many more as well. But it is really good to have seen so many and thought about them in the ways that we have. Neither of us are dying, hopefully. So if you want to talk about movies, the Discord will still be around.
Yep.
If you want to jump in there and chat with us, or if you know us IRL, like many of you do, then you can chat with us about movies there. Movies will still be coming out in real life, and we will watch them and have opinions on them. That is for sure.
Yeah, so this is farewell for now, and we are going to stay tuned because we're going to record a little bit of ironically, we're going to end the show with a table of contents of the show. So now that we are at this break point, we're going to record another episode that will kind of guide new people through all the things we've done. But it will also be for anyone who's been around the show for a little bit. It'll be a little bit of a retrospective, a little bit of a nostalgia trip. And
it's going to be like I heard some of it for the first time.
I know. I have some quiz questions ready for Alex, so it's going to be fun to see what we remember from the last 8.5 years.
You guys don't remember, we used to open up the shows for a while there with quiz questions. So this is a very, and it was often me asking Jonathan a question. So this is very much a shoe on the other foot type moment. Okay, that'll be fun.
All right, so yeah, stay tuned for that, and that's well, I didn't adapt the outro for this one, so we're just kind of winging it.
Yeah, I was about to say the outro doesn't quite read correctly, but I like that it ends with, I like that it implies certain possibilities in the future, and it's very similar to many endings we've seen in many movies. So we'll go with it. Well, that's about all the time we have for this episode.
To find links to things that we talked about today, as well as a complete list of past episodes and all 525 films we've covered so far, visit thefilmlings.com.
You can also join us for ongoing film discussions on our Discord server.
And to stay posted about whatever else we're doing, follow us. Just go to the website, thefilmlings.com.
Yeah,
we don't
website's
post on
probably
Twitter
the best
anymore.
place. No, yeah.
And for the final time, this is Blue Jay. You can discover everything I do at www.thebluejayproject.com.
If you like the show, let us know. Leave us a review on iTunes so other people will know what we're all about.
We definitely appreciate it.
Talk to you next time.
All right. See ya.
man, there's this skit from an improv. This does not have to be in the show, by the way. I just wanted to tell you about it. There's this skit from a improv show that I watch, where they give one of the contestants who does a good Tom Cruise impression. His prompt is Tom Cruise.
Is this Game Changers?
It is. Have you seen this?
I don't know about this one in particular, but I do enjoy Game Changers.
It's Josh, and Josh's prompt is Tom Cruise describes his newest stunt, and he describes this crazy, over the top, ridiculous stunt, and this like basically sounding coked up Tom Cruise impression, which is pretty accurate Tom Cruise impression. And then his next prompt
is, oh, sorry, Josh, I misread that. It's Tom Cruise performs his crazy new stunt that he's super excited about. Pause again. That one's just the audacity breaking.
The audacity. 172 episodes, still with the technical difficulties.